Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
Michael, a pleasure again this week. It has been 100 years since the end of the war to end all wars. You know it now as World War I. Before World War II, it was just the Great War. What happened? Why should we care? Why is it even important to us today that it's been 100 years? We'll be joined later in the hour by one of the country's leading military historians, Patrick O'Donnell, and we'll find out why. Stay put. The Florida Roundtable begins following these messages.
Where do you want to go on a vacation or honeymoon? The Caribbean, Europe, Hawaii, Mexico? How about Disney or a cruise? At Superior Cruise and Travel, we've got you covered. We'll assign you your own travel concierge. They'll help you design a custom vacation plan that you can't find online. And the service is completely free. You can't compare the value of this to any other online travel company. We can help you plan a custom vacation anywhere in the world. We even offer payment plans with no credit card required. Now you pay off your vacation on your time schedule. Call now and mention the promo code RADIO and save up to $500. Book your custom trip. Call Superior Cruise and Travel now and talk to one of the highest rated travel agencies in the country with a 5-star A+ online rating.
800-659-5087. 800-659-5087. 800-659-5087. That's 800-659-5087.
For Florida families facing the challenge of a loved one with an opioid use disorder, it's important to know that shallow breathing, snoring, or gurgling sounds and unresponsiveness can all be signs of an overdose. In the event of an emergency, an at-home rescue treatment like naloxone can help save a life. Naloxone is available without a prescription and doesn't need to be administered by a health professional. Find out more at isavefl.com. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Children and Families.
Floridians love boating with family and friends, exploring our state's amazing waterways. But even experienced boaters can lose sight of the risks of passengers standing or sitting in improper locations. Bow riding by passengers of any age is extremely dangerous. Be sure that passengers only sit or stand in designated areas while underway. Their safety is your responsibility. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
This is a special edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
Well, Michael, as we mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, it's been 100 years since the end of World War I. It ended in the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of the year 1918. Wow, 100 years. And we were latecomers to World War I, you know.
Tried to stay out of it for a lot of years.
We did. One of the things, Woodrow Wilson won his second term in office in 1916. His campaign, one of his main campaign slogans was, "He kept us out of war."
Yeah, I recently visited the Woodrow Wilson Presidential Library in Virginia and saw a lot of the campaign stickers and stuff, and a lot of them said, "America first."
Yes.
Which you hear a lot now, but back then it was talking about keeping America first by staying out of the war.
Exactly. World War I started in 1914 in a little place, Sarajevo. Of course, it's become famous as the 20th century went along. But the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were assassinated by the Black Hand. Yes, there were Muslim versus Christians, and that is a part of how World War I got started. And so Europe had been at this thing for a couple of years already in 1916. And both of the candidates for president in 1916, the Democrat Woodrow Wilson and the Republican Charles Evans Hughes, said, "We have no business getting into this war. And there were problems at home and whatnot. You know, there was a big segment of our population of German heritage. And Germany was the enemy. You know, we had England, France, and Russia. Soviet Union wasn't there yet on one side, and you had Germany and the Austria-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire on the other side. And so there was a lot of split opinion in the United States as to whether or not we should get into this thing at all. And we're going to talk about that. But I wanted to mention that in 1918, here we are in the war, and we got a couple of million guys that are ready to get in there, and that's a big separate story. But the Spanish flu breaks out up in Massachusetts and spreads along the East Coast. And the Spanish flu, nobody really understood the influenza business in those days, actually killed more people in the United States than we lost soldiers in the war.
Yeah.
And I think that is
devastating,
a rather incredible statistic. That, you know, so many people died. You see famous pictures of policemen in Boston directing traffic on the street in medical masks with their nose and mouth covered because they were afraid that what was spreading this influenza was floating around in the air.
Yeah, they really didn't know, and they called it the Spanish flu, but it went well beyond Spain.
Yes, it certainly did. And so it was 1918 was an absolutely incredible year, and we don't want to give away too many things here, but there are a lot of firsts that happened in 1918, even in this country, and we're going to discuss these things. Patrick O'Donnell has been a good friend of this program, and through the years, the last 20 years or so, he has basically become one of the country's leading military historians. His most recent book is called The Unknowns. It's the story of World War I and the creation of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers as it stands today at Arlington National Cemetery in Arlington, Virginia. And we're going to learn all about that. We trust that you will find the hour ahead to be interesting and that you will enjoy our conversation. So we'll invite you to stay put because Patrick O'Donnell has an awful lot. I don't know how we're going to get it all into 1 hour, I can tell you that. But we're going to give it our best shot. We remind you that this is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
If you'll stay put, our conversation continues following these messages.
Nothing's better than taking to Florida's waterways with family and friends. But some boat operators don't realize that bow riding is extremely dangerous. It can lead to tragic accidents if someone falls overboard because of speed or direction changes. Be sure your passengers sit only in manufacturer-designated areas while underway. Their safety is your responsibility. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
It was a great night partying and laughing with friends. That is, until you decided to drive impaired. Now there's thousands in fines, no license, and possibly jail time. And that's if everyone is lucky enough to survive. No fun at all. Celebrate responsibly. Use a ride service, call a friend, or have a designated driver. Always drive sober so that everyone can arrive alive. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bare Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bare Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And Michael, as promised at this point in the program, we are joined by a man who has become a very good friend of the Florida Roundtable over the years, a gentleman that I consider to be one of the United States' leading military historians this day. Patrick O'Donnell is with us. And Patrick, welcome to the Florida Roundtable. It's nice to have you back.
Oh, it's great to be back, Reagan. Thank you.
It's been 100 years since the end of World War I, and of course your most recent work is called The Unknowns, which provides the history of World War I and the story of the creation of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. And 100 years, it ages me because two of my grandfathers fought in World War I, and I remember them talking about it as a little kid, and it doesn't seem that it's been that long since they passed. I can remember doing concerts here in Florida where they would ask the World War I veterans to stand up. But Patrick, World War I, in the first place, why should a young person today care that it's been 100 years since we fought this war?
It's a war that so much has flowed from. I mean, this was a seminal event of the 20th century. It's the most important, one of the most important events of the 20th century. It reshaped the modern Middle East. It changed the world from the old world to the new world. It was the birth of the modern civil rights movement, the emancipation of women, the ability for them to vote. It was the change of it became the American century eventually. It was to put us on the path to that. There are so many things that comes from this, from World War I, and I don't think most people realize it.
You brought up a lot of interesting points there, like the emancipation of women. Why did World War I lead to that? Because,
20% of the women that had to work in war production factories were women, and after the war, it changed the entire the way we're thinking about women. So that was one of the major factors for the start of that thinking.
Well, we were talking earlier before you joined us, Patrick, that World War I started actually in 1914. In a little place called Sarajevo, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife. And I wanted to talk for a minute because this also was a change. But, people look back at George Washington and his farewell address when he talked about avoiding entangling alliances and no permanent alliances. And that's pretty much how World War I got started. This side said, well, you did that and we did that, and we're declaring war on you. And all of a sudden, all of Europe had chosen up sides and we were at war.
That's true. I mean, it's amazing how a single, small, tiny event can literally change and shape history. And the Archduke Ferdinand sets off this series of alliances that then begins this massive war. It's incredible how a single tiny event can change and shape history, and that's exactly one of them.
And of course,
my book is a World War I combat history of the war, and it talks about the 8 body bearers in that war that brought back the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And we have a little bit of history at the beginning of the war, but it's really about individuals, in those 8 individuals, and also the 9th man that chose the unknown soldier. And it's about the last year of the war, 1918, where America is involved. And I can't believe I've seen stuff where people actually say that America didn't make a difference, and the reality is that war would have never been won by the Allies if it hadn't been for the United States. If it hadn't been for the United States' money, resources, and most importantly, its men. And, millions of men eventually made it over to Europe. And it was that decisive factor that the Germans were staring at when they realized that there was no way that they could win that war.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand that, and we mentioned this just before you joined us. Basically, we had Britain, France, and Russia against Germany and Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. And the fact is that by the time the United States was getting into the war, Germany had actually knocked Russia out of the war. The Russians surrendered, and it freed hundreds of thousands of German troops to come back into Europe and fight on the Western Front. And had we not been there, it might have been an entirely different story. And I think a lot of people don't realize that.
No, they took 50 divisions off the Eastern Front and then directed them to the Western Front. And those units were just in a massive amount of manpower that once they were directed, they basically blew holes right through the Western Front's lines for the alliance of the Entente. And, you know, especially this is the case in June, where it was the American divisions that were put in, as the French line was just blown wide open. The Americans were rushed forward and placed there and literally helped save Paris. And it was the American morale that, you know, these Frenchmen saw that, like, wow, these guys continue to fight even though we're melting away. It gave them hope. And the Germans became actually petrified of us because, you know, they were like, wow, these Americans don't give up. Fight to the death in most cases.
And you talk about the morale of the American soldier, and your book is a lot about that. It's about individuals and what they did over there. What was it that encouraged that morale in the individual American soldier?
Well, I mean, there's a number of factors. I think the United States hadn't been over there that long. It had only been over there a few months, for the most part. I mean, the war begins in May 1917 for the United States, or April, 1917. We get over there. They have to train. They haven't really seen the harsh combat of years of war that the Europeans have been going through. So they were fresh relatively. And then there's also just the American fighting spirit, the American way of war that I think is important. And that, you know, there's an American exceptionalism involved and wrapped around all of that I think is quite compelling. And, you know, I think what's really amazing is most of our boys were given the worst tactics and sometimes just French equipment that wasn't that great in many cases. But they innovated and they changed and they became great soldiers. And they literally, at the end of the war, defeated the greatest army in the world at the time, the German army.
I think, Patrick, I want to insert here something. Over the years, one of my hobbies is collecting antique audio. And, of course, 1918, recording is pretty much in its infancy, not much in the way of films and things of that nature. But one of the things that occurs early on, and that is the French and the British want to take the American troops as they come in and break up the units and put them in and mix them in with the British and the French. And General John J. Pershing said, absolutely not. Americans will fight in their own units together, and that's how it's going to be. And, of course, John J. Pershing was the commander of the Allied expedition. And I have in the collection here, and this takes just about a half a minute, an actual recording of General Pershing that was made in Paris in early in 1918, and this is I hate to say it's a forerunner of the kind of things we do today, but it is a piece of audio encouraging and explaining to the people at home what is going on. So you're going to hear the actual voice of General John J. Pershing from Paris in 1918.
3,000 miles from home, an American army is fighting for you. Everything you hold worthwhile is at stake. Only the hardest blows can win against the enemy we are fighting. Invoking the spirit of our forefathers, the Army asks your unflinching support to the end that the high ideals for which America stands may endure upon the earth.
A little bit of positive selling there of the war effort by the commanding general himself. And who knew that that was going on in 1918?
Right. I mean, this is the one order that Wilson gave Pershing was, do not let the Army be broken up by the Allies. It was really some astute advice because the Allies were very desperately short of men and reinforcements. And what they wanted to do was basically cannibalize the units that we brought over there and fill them into their lines as cannon fodder so that they can continue their assaults. But a unified army, an independent American army, would allow us to show the world its results. And it was political power, and that was the key. Because at the end of the war, Wilson wanted to have that political power and clout to be able to help dictate, a peace that he envisioned. Had we just basically, frittered away those men and put them into the units, Allied units, that may not have ever happened, and we would not have had the political clout that we eventually had at the end of the war.
Well, I find it interesting, too, Patrick, that I had mentioned, there was a large influx of German immigrants before we got into the war. And the war itself was by no means a popular thing. There was no sneak Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor to get us into World War I. And Wilson won his second term with the campaign slogan, "He kept us out of war." And so I found it intriguing that General Pershing was recording these positive things, pointing out to the Americans at home, hey, this is important to our way of life, and this is something that we have to do. Well, it's 10 million dead by the time we got done, and, of course, we're going to talk about that in the creation of the Tomb of the Unknowns. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
The Florida Roundtable continues in a moment.
It's happening to you every night. One snores, and the other can't sleep. It seems like there's no end to it. But now there's a quick and easy-to-use solution, a natural solution. Snore Stop. Try it risk-free today. Snore Stop was created and tested by a team of physicians and has been helping couples sleep for over 20 years. It is the #1 selling anti-snoring medicine in the U.S. Snore Stop sprays or tablets are now available nationwide. All you have to do is call. It's time to try Snore Stop and make every night a better night for both of you. Don't wait. Try Snore Stop, the #1 selling anti-snoring medicine in the U.S. spray or tablets. Call right now for free shipping and your 100% risk-free trial offer. 800-960-4918. 800-960-4918. 800-960-4918. That's 800-960-4918.
Florida's boating environment is always changing. New sunsets, new experiences that you won't find anywhere else on Earth. But one thing that never changes, boating while impaired by drugs or alcohol. It's illegal in the state of Florida. Boating under the influence will land you in jail, or worse, kill someone you love. It's just simply not a risk worth taking. Learn more about Florida's boating laws at myfwc.com. Brought to you by the FWC Division of Law Enforcement.
Your yard's days of being picked on are over, thanks to the science of Behr Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Its penetrating formula is specifically designed to kill hard-to-control brush, like kudzu, poison ivy, poison oak, and wild berries, roots and all. And the concentrate product even kills stumps, so your yard never has to worry about being bullied. Behr Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. BehrAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
Terrorist acts and shootings are often described as great tragedies. They are not. We live in a world so concerned with being politically correct that they're afraid to call evil what it is, evil. Man's sin nature is as old as the Garden of Eden. Many love to blame culture, poverty, or lack of education and opportunity as the problem. They may have a good or bad impact, but the big problem is sin. Acknowledging our sin nature will show us our need for a Savior who changes us from within. That Savior's name is Jesus. He came to die for the sins of all who will acknowledge their sin. Faith in Him strikes a mighty blow at evil. So quit calling man's evil acts a tragedy. They are evil and God hates it. Yet thankfully, He loves us in spite of our evil and sin. Jesus not only forgives us, but gives us the want to overcome evil with good. This is Brian Wright, speaking right from my heart.
All right, crew, let's get her dug.
Honey, you want to give me a hand? I'm planting that tree, remember?
No matter how large or small your digging project may be, no matter how urban or rural, you must always call 811 before any digging project. 811 is our national one-call number, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 business days before any digging project, so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. This includes natural gas and petroleum pipelines, electric, communication cables, and water and sewer lines. So before you do this or this, make sure you do this. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811. Brought to you by Common Ground Alliance.
From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And our very special guest this day is military historian Patrick K. O'Donnell. And Patrick has been doing this program with us these many years. Patrick, I almost hesitate to think how long you and I have been friends and been talking about the fighting man of America. And over the years, why, yes, I do feel you have become one of our leading military historians. So we're delighted to have you with us. This special edition focusing on this 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. I don't think I mentioned it earlier. About 10 million soldiers die in World War I. And we left at the end of that last segment on the note of how Wilson and General Pershing kept Americans together. But this was, we're dealing in trench warfare. The first time around that the Germans are using poison gas. And people really have forgotten what a horrible thing this was.
I mean, this is a different type of war that most Americans are. I mean, most Americans have seen World War II. I mean, this is an incredibly unique way of war fighting. I mean, the way I like to describe it is, I mean, like, for instance, the Meuse Argonne lasted 47 days. It was 47 days of pure hell. And in many cases, it was 47 days of going against fixed fortifications. If you've seen, like, Saving Private Ryan, that's kind of like the opening scene where they get off the landing craft and they have to go against the bunkers and machine gun positions. And there's artillery falling around and mortars. That was their war, without any body armor or anything else, just, little tin helmets and wool uniforms and bolt-action rifles. And these men had to go against these fixed positions, and it's just incredible. But you throw in the persistent poison gas as another aspect of all of that. And this stuff was everywhere, and it was, just a whiff of it in your lungs and you could die, or if you got in your uniform and underneath it caused massive rashes. It was just incredibly deadly.
Yeah, and you talk about how it was a different kind of war in so many ways, but isn't it true as well that some of the generals in Europe at the beginning of the war didn't really understand that. They were still trying to do, regular cavalry units and invasions that way that just weren't working, right?
Totally. I mean, even Pershing himself, who we look at, to some degree very positively, he looked at the machine gun as a auxiliary weapon, the bolt-action rifle being the primary. And it's like, no, this is modern warfare. The machine gun is incredibly important. Not only that, the real innovation here was the use of combined arms. In other words, combining the machine gun, combining the tank, combining the aircraft and artillery, all to be used as one. And that's something that the Army initially goes into combat almost in Civil War style formations and tactics, and then it learns the importance of these combined arms, and it eventually fights as a modern army. Especially the first time it really fights that way is at San Miguel. And then by the Meuse Argonne, it really is, learning and how to fight in a modern way and very effective and efficient. And one of those generals that you can thank for is almost a kind of a Patton-like figure of his day. His name is Charles P. Summerall, who I get into in the unknowns. The men did not like him for the most part when they encountered him, especially the Marine Corps. But he was definitely ahead of his time in terms of tactics and understood what needed to be done to win.
Pat, one of the interesting things that I found is that on the war comes to an end at 11 o'clock in the morning. The armistice takes effect at 11 o'clock in the morning on November 11th, 11th month, 11th day, 11th hour. But in the day preceding the ceasefire, nearly 11,000 more soldiers are killed in that one day. And the reasons I hear, and I wonder what your research shows you, is that you could kill 11,000 guys because knowing that a ceasefire is coming in a matter of hours, the two sides didn't trust each other.
Well, it was that, and then there's absolutely no protocol in place to tell men to just sort of be careful or to stand down. And the communication took place at around 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, that the war had been over and there was going to be an armistice. And then the rest of the hours were just it wouldn't take place until 11. But Pershing didn't communicate that to his men. It was the only communication was that the guns were going to cease at 11. So there was a real tragedy there. We lost over 400 Americans in that day alone. And my book, I wrote an article called "The Last Day of the War: An Bridge into Hell" for Breitbart, and it's a real tragedy because the Marines in the book that I wrote, The Unknowns, they have to cross the Meuse River. They cross on November 10th that night. And it's a real tragedy. They cross footbridges and many of them die. And they make it, some elements make it to the other side. And they're surrounded and counterattacked and nearly overrun. And it's one of those forgotten aspects of World War I.
Talk a little bit.
In many cases, it didn't necessarily have to happen.
I was just going to say, you mentioned your book. Talk a little bit about what inspired you to write this book about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
Well, every book that I've ever written has found me. This is not an exception. I was given the honor of being a tour guide for the Marine Corps. I was in Battle of Fallujah with the Marines, and they asked me to give a tour of Normandy, the beaches, for World War II. And I did that. And the next phase of the tour was Belleau Wood, where the Marine Corps had won their hallowed victory against the Germans, stopping them right before Paris. And we were walking around Belleau Wood, which is still very scarred from war. And I found out that Ernest A. Jansen was the first Medal of Honor recipient for the Marine Corps. And it was there that Jansen I also found that Jansen was a body bearer for Pershing, for the unknown soldier, and that's where I wanted to know more. It's my curiosity. I wanted to know who the other men were. And I found out that they were chosen specifically to tell the story. And the story of this war. And it's an extraordinary one. And who I knew was when the book had found me. And from there, I just I wrote The Unknowns, and each one of the stories in that book could be a movie because they're unique and different. It's not just the guys on the ground. It's the Navy, it's the Marine Corps. It's the infantry from the coast artillery, the big guns. It's everybody. But they represent all who fought in World War I for the AEF, and they take the stories together. It's the story of World War I through their eyes, which is the story of the unknowns in my book.
Now, the business of using an unknown, and we've seen it here in recent days. Am I understanding properly that the one at the Arc de Triomphe and the one in England, that these pretty much came first?
Absolutely did.
Yeah, and then we kind of picked up on that idea that we should have one here too.
Yeah, it was a fight. We didn't want to have an unknown soldier, and it was the French and English that first came up with the idea, and from there, a woman editor decided to put it out there that we needed an unknown soldier, and she created a movement, and the press picked it up, and even the War Department finally saw public opinion had shifted, and they got behind it. But prior to that, it didn't happen, and the movement inspired Hamilton Fish, who was a congressman from New York City. And Fish was a white officer in a black unit, and the black unit, the Harlem Hellfighters, an incredible unit.
I tell you what, Patrick, hang on to that thought for a minute here, because the clock has caught up with us. We need to take a pause along our network line here, and we've got to remind folks that this is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Patrick K. O'Donnell, author of The Unknowns, the story of the unknown soldiers and of World War I, available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. If you'll stay put, our conversation continues in a moment.
Have you found yourself? Here are some ways people try to. A lot of successful people are goal setters, but too often when we reach those goals, we still feel empty inside. Goal setting isn't the answer. Education, we know, can enrich our understanding of life, but speaking with a couple of men that graduated high in their class at MIT, they told me they still felt empty. Education isn't the answer. Work. When you pour yourself into your work, you understand more about yourself, but even when you're successful at work, you can still feel empty inside. No, work isn't the answer. Relationship with friends, family members, and coworkers. Okay, you're getting close. While all these things are important, the key to finding yourself is having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Ultimate meaning is found in healthy relationships, beginning with Jesus and then with our fellow man. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click Devotions to read the daily devotion and send to a friend.
Are we there yet?
There's nothing better than a fun family road trip.
Come on, are we there yet?
Don't let a bad tire get between you and your destination. Before hitting the road this holiday season, make sure your tires are properly inflated, damage-free, and have adequate tread depth, including the spare tire. Inspect your tires regularly and keep your family happily rolling down the highway on safe tires. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles.
An opioid overdose does not need to end in tragedy. At-home rescue treatments like naloxone products can help you save the life of a friend or a loved one. Naloxone is available without a prescription and doesn't need to be administered by a health professional. Learn to recognize the signs of an overdose, like unresponsiveness, snoring sounds, and shallow breathing, and be prepared for an emergency by keeping a naloxone product on hand. Find out more at isavefl.com. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Children and Families.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Patrick K. O'Donnell. He is the author of The Unknowns. It is a story of World War I and the creation of America's Unknown Memorial that now stands at Arlington National Cemetery. Patrick, it is always a pleasure to have you with us. You were beginning to tell the story there as we went into that last break of the unknown movement, the memorial coming to the United States, and you were talking about Congressman Hamilton Fish from New York, and I want you to pick up that thread for us.
Sure. I mean, Hamilton Fish is the mainspring behind the bill that eventually gets passed in Congress that becomes the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And Fish is really quite an extraordinary figure in and of himself. He lives to be over 100 years old, and he's from a very powerful family in New York City. But during World War I, he was a white officer in the Black/Puerto Rican Harlem Hellfighters, and this is a segregated unit that fought very bravely and distinctively in France. And Fish really wanted it to honor his men, but also honor all of those who were unknown and all those who sacrificed. Sponsors the bill, gets it passed. President Wilson signs it into law. And then it's not until 1921, when President Harding is in office, that the actual tomb is constructed and the bodies are selected in France.
Yeah, and talk a little bit how they selected the pallbearers who were going to be the ones to put the body there.
Sure. Let me just back up a slight bit. The first part of this process is that in October 1921, there are about 2,700 Americans that are unknown in France. Their bodies are mangled, dismembered. There's no identification on them to identify them as who they were. And the Graves Registration Service then goes to the 4 major cemeteries in France where they correspond with the significant battles that we had fought in Lemieux-Argonne, the battles for Belleau Wood, for instance, Saint-Mihiel, and then the Somme, where the Americans had fought with the British. And they removed 4 bodies from each one of those cemeteries. Each one of those bodies they made sure that there was no identification whatsoever. And they were carefully checked again to make sure there was no dog tags, anything. And then they were brought back to Chalon, France, where a general officer was going to choose the unknown soldier. But at the last minute, it's quite interesting. The Americans, the French come up to the Americans and say, look, we used an enlisted man to select our unknown soldier. And they make the decision to, at the last minute, to choose an enlisted man. And there were several men that were there in France for occupation duty that were pallbearers, if you will. And one of those men, Edward Younger, was chosen to select the unknown soldier. And, it's quite an amazing story of how Younger, selects the unknown soldier. I found his original, papers and diary where he wrote down his thoughts that night, and he realized the awesome responsibility that he has. He goes into the room. He's given just a clutch of white roses, and said, select from one of those 4 flag-draped coffins. And he realizes just the gravity of this situation, because this will be the unknown soldier that we'll have for the rest of our, the United States. And he walks in and is initially nervous, and he prays, and he's just drawn to the second coffin to his right, and he feels that is a man that he had known. somebody that had potentially died in combat. And his hand just moves right to it without even thinking. And he places the clutch of roses on the top of the casket, and that is the tomb of the unknown soldier.
It's an incredible story. Yeah, go ahead.
And then the body is brought back to the United States. And the remaining body bearers, if you will, then transport the casket from the USS Olympia, which is this famed flagship of Admiral Dewey during the Spanish-American War, which still exists, by the way, it's in Pennsylvania and at Philadelphia. And the casket's removed on the 9th of November. It's then transported by the body bearers to Lion State in the Capitol Rotunda. And who's who of American society is part of the ceremony on the 11th. It's also who's who of the world, and every the major leaders of World War I are present, and they present their greatest military decorations. The tomb is the American is also received the Medal of Honor and the Distinguished Service Cross, and it's many decorations from the great powers of the world, as well as even the minor powers, and it's then transported on the caisson that President Lincoln's body was transported after his assassination to Arlington Cemetery, where it is then interred.
And I think one of the important things for us to remember, and you've pointed this out, the pallbearers are actually, these are soldiers, sailors, these where it very easily could have been a couple of generals, a couple of admirals. It could have been the high-ranking fellas saying, I want to do this. No, they got the guy that was the kid on the street corner who ended up in the midst of this great war, and they were the fellas that took the coffin to its rest.
It's the people that fought the war, and in most cases, these people were highly decorated. Many of them had received the Medal of Honor, and their stories are quite extraordinary. They are the ones that actually carry the body to the actual grave in Arlington and bring it to rest. And they were chosen because they were, on a fundamental level, they were 6 feet high. That was one little requirement. But they also had to be active duty and highly decorated. But Pershing also wanted to make sure that each branch of service, the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, were represented for their aspect of World War I. But these men were also chosen for the story that they carried as well, that they carried home.
Patrick,
and their story was extraordinary.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but it is an extraordinary story. Again, the book is The Unknown, available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. And Patrick O'Donnell, thank you for observing this 100th anniversary of the end of World War I with us this day.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
We look forward to our next visit, my friend, and we know that there are many fine histories in the pen of Patrick O'Donnell yet to come. Well, this is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
A brief closing thought following these messages.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-321-5396. That's 800-321-5396. Again, 800-321-5396.
Where do you want to go on a vacation or honeymoon? The Caribbean, Europe, Hawaii, Mexico? How about Disney or a cruise? At Superior Cruise and Travel, we've got you covered. We'll assign you your own travel concierge. They'll help you design a custom vacation plan that you can't find online. And the service is completely free. You can't compare the value of this to any other online travel company. We can help you plan a custom vacation anywhere in the world. We even offer payment plans with no credit card required. Now you pay off your vacation on your time schedule. Call now and mention the promo code RADIO and save up to $500. Book your custom trip. Call Superior Cruise and Travel now and talk to one of the highest rated travel agencies in the country with a 5-star A+ online rating.
800-659-5087. 800-659-5087. 800-659-5087. That's 800-659-5087.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Employ Florida offers resources and services to help you find employment.
Hi, Gary here. Employ Florida helped me improve my interview skills, plus write a great resume. I attended networking events with many employers and other industry professionals just like me. With the workshops and training found at employflorida.com, I was able to land a great job in my field.
Job resources, real results, hired. EmployFlorida.com. That's EmployFlorida.com.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And our guest today, Patrick K. O'Donnell, author of The Unknowns, on this special edition of the Florida Roundtable, observing the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. The Great War. The war to end all wars. Except it didn't turn out that way.
Yeah, not even close. In fact, the next war was worse.
Oh, and much of it attributable to the peace negotiations at Versailles that were supposed to be bringing an end to World War I. Wilson and Lloyd George, sometimes so mixed up, they'd have to have somebody bring in a globe to show them where they were drawing boundaries and trying to separate people. One of my favorite lines coming out of this, and I believe it was Lloyd George, you know, Woodrow Wilson had his 14 points, and that was going to run the whole world. And he really wanted them. And Lloyd George said, well, Wilson had his 14 points that will run the world. God only had 10.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
We'll see, huh? Well, we thank you for your time this day. We invite you to join us next week. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
We'll see you again with another edition of the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to the Florida Roundtable, a news and public affairs presentation of the Florida News Network. The views and opinions expressed during this show are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's management, ownership, or sponsors. Please email your comments to reagansmith@fnnonline.net.